everyone, how is it going? Are you enjoying RevEx Fest so far? If you're enjoying, I'm pretty sure you're going to enjoy this next session. Welcome to the day one of RevEx Fest, the Revenue Excellence Summit, brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar with Modern Sales Pros, we are the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer the toughest revenue questions out there. If you're not a member yet, you will be invited to join right after this summit. Now on to our amazing sponsors. This summit wouldn't be possible without our amazing sponsors who you see in this slide. Big thanks to them for making RevEst happen and for bring us all those amazing speakers. To learn more about these innovative companies, click the sponsors book tab at the top of this event page. Also, you can check out the jam-packed agenda by visiting the agenda tab at the top of this event page to see the full schedule of events. This is just day one. We have 2 more days to go. We have the rest of the day and then 2 more days to go. I'm pretty sure you're going to find something that you will take a lot of value out of. Now, here's the agenda for this session. I'll go over some housekeeping notes, our fireside chat. Speakers will do intros and then they will get right into content. But before we dive into content today, here are some housekeeping notes. This event is being recorded, so you can access the recording after the event in the Modern Sales Pros website. And if you have questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function on the right side of your screen. Also, the chat is wide open. Please interact with each other, do some networking, ask questions in the chat. Tell us where you're calling from. We love to hear where you're calling from. And lastly, go ahead and check out all of our amazing speakers and sponsors by navigating to the tabs at the top of your screen at this event. Now let's get started with this exciting fireside chat with Manny Medina. I'll pass it off to Pete Kazanji, who will be our moderator for this afternoon fireside chat, for this morning's fireside chat with Manny Medina. Pete, you can take it away from here.
Hi, Manny. How are you?
Good to see you, Pete. I'm great.
All right. Excellent. I'm super pumped for our discussion today. Manny, for folks who maybe have been like hiding in a rock and might not be familiar with you, maybe you can introduce yourself and tell folks a little bit about what you do, what Outreach does and what you did before Outreach.
Sure. So Outreach is, start with me. So I'm Manny Medina, co-founder and CEO of Outreach. And Outreach is the leading sales execution platform. And sales execution is a category that we are putting together from the combination of both engagement, pipeline generation, deal management, and forecasting. We believe that the entirety of the sales execution needs a category of its own, and it needs a set of solutions and a platform of its own. And that's what Outreach does. It allows you to close the different gaps in execution, whether it's pipeline generation with USDRs or AEs, or needing more pipeline from self-generated pipeline from the AEs, or deal management to make sure that you have real-time enablement in meetings, or that you know what to do, how to engage your buyers in a successful mutual action plan, or take all that information and use that for forecasting, so what are you going to do this quarter and 2 quarters out. That's the bulk of what we do. What did I do before? I did this. Outreach is a pivot. So before Outreach, I worked on a company that was the predecessor of Outreach that almost went out of business, and that's where you and I met, because you were my supplier of information into what became Outreach.
Good old HR tech. Good old
That's
HR
right.
tech.
I love that space. Great space.
Wonderful. Well, I'll just introduce myself really quickly to folks who may not be familiar with me. My name's Pete Kazanji. I am the founder of Atrium. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software. It's software that exists to help sales managers, leaders, and reps use metrics to improve their performance. And prior to Atrium, I started a a recruiting software company called TalentBin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And that's kind of where I went from being like a business generalist founder to like our first seller, our first sales manager, then eventually our sales leader. And then when we were acquired by Monster, I was responsible for new product sales at Monster Worldwide. Subsequent to that, I wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and then also started the nation's largest sales operations and leadership community, Modern Sales Pros. So that's a little bit on me there. So yeah, Manny, you were kind of mentioning the outreach. I wanted to give the opportunity for folks to kind of hear the Outreach Foundation story, because like I don't know if there's a lot of organizations that were like in the sales tech space that were pivots. Maybe you can share a little bit of like where Outreach came from and kind of like what inspired the initial spark.
Yeah. So you were so close to this, Pete, that you're going to get a special the special access to the story.
All right, I love it.
So we had a marketplace that we believe was going to revolutionize sales hiring. We were going to match buyers, meaning employers, and sellers, meaning employees or people looking in talent, looking for a new place. We, with a mix of profiles and matching, etc. Well, we got the marketplace up and running, and it was not quite working. I wasn't getting liquidity. And in December 2013, that lack of liquidity meant that the company itself only had 2 months of cash left. When you are a company that is not growing and is trying to figure out a way out, there's no funding available to you. So the only way for us to get out of the hole was to execute. So, and to sell our way out. So we took a step back, my co-founders and I, and we decided to completely stop working on the product, on the marketplace, and work on whatever will generate sales. So we decompose we were very early, we were very naive. So we decompose sort of like the principal components of sales, if you would. And one is communication, the second one is meetings, and the next one, opportunity to close. So we figured that if there's a way for us to reach to both, to talent and to employers in a personalized way, and then follow up, that we're going to get some increase in meeting and conversations and conversion. So we build an engine internally that would take a profile, we'll find whatever we could out of that profile, and then give it to an ecosystem of writers. So they will come in and they would write subject line, and they would write the intro line.
Really?
And then we will compile that into a pitch that was A/B tested, of course, and then that will go out either to an employer and to a talent, or to a person we wanted to target. And then the engine will follow up with, sort of like automated but personalized, follow-up. Right? You get to see it. The result of that was a 40% reply rate in cold emails. Wow. And it became really profitable really quickly, because we will pay, I don't know, somewhere between 25 cents to 50 cents per email generated. And as the writers came in and they got better at it, we sort of, demoted the bad ones, promoted the good ones. And then the email reply rate got even better and better and better and better. So we're swimming in interactions, and now we're swimming in meetings. But now I'm in month 1 of my 2 months left of cash without generating cash, but generating a lot of meetings. So now I have 1 month to actually turn this around, go to recruiters, to agency recruiters, and see if I can sell them meetings, Can I be your appointment center? Sure. And that model is kind of weird for them, as you know, like they don't do that. So they look at me and he's like, how are you generating these meetings? But I'm like, well, we build this engine that personalizes and follows up, and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, stop, I want to buy the engine. I don't want to buy your
the meetings.
And I actually was pitching. I'm like, you plug this in to TalentBin, and you have a machine, right? You will be swimming in meetings with candidates or with employers in no time. So, after getting that feedback so many times, we decided to make a small pivot. We asked the board, we play a little bit of poker with the board and be like, look, the company can just fold, or we have this other idea that turns out has some traction and is getting people's, eyebrows raised. And you can put, $100,000 in it, or we can just go home. And they were like, all right. So, fast forward, December 2014, the product is ready, we're selling it, and Jason Lemkin comes up with the word sales stack in one of his many SaaS publications. And we were part of the stack. So now you needed to buy CRM and other things, and all the cool kids were buying other things. You were part of the cool kids back then because you were op savant, and the stack became a real thing. And you know, after that we took off, and you know, rest is history.
That's crazy. And I think the what's interesting there is that I knew that the company was a pivot out of the talent marketplace, but I didn't realize that there was like recruiters who were telling you like, well, I would like to buy your engagement software, and you're like, but then obviously there are way more salespeople and SDRs than there are recruiters, and you know, when they do more activity and have more meetings, it turns into revenue, which you know probably has a higher propensity to buy than recruitment marketing automation. That's really fascinating.
And the way it actually happened, it was actually a singular incident where we sold one of the first customers was App Dynamics, which you know was super hot 5 years ago before they sold to Cisco. And we sold to the recruiting team, and I was trying to sell more licenses, and they were like, "Manny, we're out of recruiters. Like, you don't just have that many, but like, you should really talk to our SDR team. We're really hiring strongly there." And they do the same job. So they took my hand, they walked me over to the SDR pit, and like walked over, like call the, you know, Joe, the SDR manager, like, "Joe, want to take a look at this thing?" And like, I did the demo. I was like, "All right, stop. We need that right now." We sold 20 licenses in the building. And after that, I called my co-founder on the way out. "Hey, I have a better idea than selling to recruiting."
That's hilarious, man. I on one of the other fireside chats for the RevEx Fest here, I been talking with Robert Wabe from HighSpot, and he was talking about how so many of the good ideas that they've like codified in HighSpot has come from watching customer behaviors and like watching the desire paths. So it's really fascinating to hear that like it was a similar situation there. You know, like nobody knew about Group Talent, the prior company. Now everybody knows about Outreach. How did the company kind of go from like this initial insight around like, oh, I have a better idea, it turns out these SDRs could really use the heck out of this, to kind of like the next stage, not all the way to like sales execution, because I want to get into that a little bit later, but like, you know, what do the next couple of years look like once you guys kind of found that crazy product market fit around sales engagement to SDR populations?
Yeah, the first aha moment was that everything was around the main insight was not the ability to send out a lot of emails or make a lot of calls. It's to string together a workflow. And our, you know, our initial primitive workflow was, you know, it could be email, you know, call, whatever. But then you could put like a null step, or like a wait step, and say like, go do research, or like go text, or like
take an action,
do something else, right? And the idea is that by generating these workflows, you remove the cognitive load of somebody trying to figure out what to do next.
Yeah.
And by giving them that, and removing the cognitive load, then you allow the SDR or whoever is prospecting to be in the zone of whatever you're doing, whether you're cold calling, or whether you're sending emails, or you're researching. You know, as you know, to get into the flow, you need to repeat the action for several times in a span of say 5 minutes, right? Like a Pomodoro activity type. Right. So when we brought this along, like the amount of people who were using it in that sense just exploded. And all of a sudden, efficiency went through the roof, because you're getting the same people to generate way more activity, and then the activity got better over time. Because the more you do it, the more the more the machine learns, and the more the better the outcome of that activity. So the single insight was that you needed to move from like single activity to workflow of activities. And then once you do that, and then you schedule the day for the whoever is doing the pipeline generation, so that they don't have to think about it. Then you actually opening, so it's counterintuitive. You're actually opening up their mind space to do other things that are more valuable, as opposed to organizing. And that's what really took off. And then that's the kind of insight that we carry through as we went from sales engagement to sales execution. The other point that is super important is that every founder has this dilemma, and I'm sure you did too. Am I a new category or am I an existing category in a different way? And you can argue this 20 ways, you know, it's a bit of a judgment call. But I think we bet on creating a new category, and it was the right bet. Because then that's how sales engagement got born. And now that is the thing that everybody understands. Like we're still evangelizing sales execution, but everybody understands engagement.
Yeah. Yep. I think the thing that you referred to earlier about like removing the overhead and just like making it such that people can just execute, but then what they can do is they can bring to bear their creativity in that execution, versus like we kind of talk about this at Atrium quite a bit, where you know, our primary users are sales managers, so like AE managers, SDR managers, you know, sales leaders, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the things that we talk about with respect to management is like, we don't want people to have to like search around looking for the problems to solve. We want them to be in the business of solving the problems, right? So like, you know, our software can identify the issues by like looking at metrics that are problematic on a rep basis or team basis or whatever. And it's like, hey, like Bobby's got a win rate problem. You know, his win rate problem is in, you know, like coming out of proposal. Susie's got an average sales price problem. It's because like her average op size is too small. Different sets of problems, but like now because they've been identified, you as a manager can go fix those. Similarly, let's not think about like, oh, what should I do next? But it says like, here you go, you got to send it, you know, you got to call this person right here who has already gotten these 2 emails previously. So, you know, get excited to like, you know, get gussied up to have like the best call right now, because you don't have to have all the cognitive load in order to like think about what I ought to do next.
Right.
One thing I wanted to ask you about is, you know, you guys are based in Seattle. A lot of organization, you know, kind of like the bigger kind of high flying SaaS organizations are oftentimes like in the Bay Area, you know, potentially in like New York, et cetera. What has it been like, kind of like building in the outside, you know, building outside of the Bay Area? Is it a competitive advantage? How has it been a competitive advantage? Like, how does that work?
It's working well now, but it wasn't always this way. When we started, Seattle was a little bit out of anyone's, you know, purview, and there was not that many wins, especially in B2B SaaS, especially in sales tech, right?
Yeah, definitely not in sales tech.
Right, and 100% of our customers for the first 2 years of our life were not in Seattle.
Yeah,
and that was kind of sobering and hard, right? Because, you know, it's easy when you can walk out of the building and walk into a customer. Yeah. And in Seattle, we didn't have the luxury to do that. The second thing that was hard is that, you know, we didn't raise from Seattle. So other than our very small seed fund or seed round from our angel investors, you know, none of the big money came from Seattle. So, you know, we have to develop this presence. Like, a matter of fact, like a lot of people thought that we were based in San Francisco, but I actually moved to San Francisco. You know, you and I met in San Francisco when I was living there. I was living in the outer Richmond. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
And yeah, and the reason I did that is because we needed to appear to be a San Francisco company to get the momentum, to get the benefit of the doubt, and to get the investment and to get the early customers. What I love about the Bay Area is that, you know, anybody will try your tool. And number one. Number two is everybody's it's like they were built on top of each other, right? So like you're either in the Soma or you're in the financial district. And there's like, you go to a building and every floor has a different startup. You can hit them all on the way up and close on the way down and get invited to the party after. You see what I mean? So like the bars are full of like the VPs and like the directors of sales and ops, and you can mingle and sale right there or fundraise. Yeah. So walk into a bar and I got really good at making people part with 10 grand. You know what I mean? So like that's how we survived through the pivot, actually. So the early days were hard, but now Seattle's established market is actually seen as a you know with Auth and with Avalara and with Apptio and
DocuSign, right?
And
Smartsheet.
Exactly. Yep. So it has, you know, the weight and the gravitas to be a real thing. But we were a logging town for the longest time. You know, I mean, this is where you go on your way to Vancouver, Canada. You know what I mean? Like, supposed to, like, you know, where you're gonna put some sales tech. The advantage of having being early through this transition
Mm.
is that a lot of people who work at Amazon or Microsoft who wanted to work at a startup
Yeah.
didn't have a lot of choices. So we had
Sure.
a lot of that momentum coming in that really benefit us, and that really benefit us in the sense that we were able to really grab some really juicy talent out of Microsoft that had experience in real-time conversational intelligence, for instance. And we were able to, do things that were magical that were not possible if it wasn't for that talent. So, I think it's beneficial, and I don't think I would have been able to do the same thing in the Bay Area.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, yeah, a lot of competition for for humans in the Bay Area. Well, so let's talk a little bit about kind of like going from being a primary solution that had like pretty wild product market fit in the form of sales engagement to now a broader sales execution platform. And I think that you guys have been building and also acquiring some companies as of late. What is inspiring that, and then B, how is that like modifying how outreach goes to market, how it talks to the market, how it represents itself in the market, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because it's a little bit of like, how do you decompose luck? You see what I mean? Like, I would love to tell you that I'm great and I of course saw this coming, etc. But there is a lot of luck in what we do, and there's a lot of luck in that if you really obsess about delivering for your customer, that wins you a conversation about what else is broken, right? So you're you come in and you do a QBR, to see how things are going. And after the QBR is over and you're in the drinking, having a few meals, part of the QBR, and you're like, what else is screwed up? And they were like, oh, just I'm glad you asked me that. I got this problem in conversion. I got this problem with my funnel. I got this problem with my SMB team. I got this problem, blah, blah, blah. And you sit there taking notes, and I'm like, holy shit, all this stuff is broken? Really? Okay. And you sort of like catalog problems. And so my co-founder, Andrew, was obsessed on like cataloging this problem. He was like a problem hunter, right? And once he grabbed into a problem, he's like, what's behind the problem? What's behind the problem? What's behind the problem? So he really became obsessed with cataloging these problems, and that's what sort of like gave us insights into how do you, okay, so what's broken in the AE workflow? And the SDR workflow is very deterministic, right? So you have all these people you want to call, and then you do all the steps to sort of get a hold of them, and your output is a meeting or a qualified sales
right? Yeah, exactly.
Right. An AE has all these other milestones, right? Like, so they have identify pain, identify buyer, identify constituents who are going to be part of it. Like, all these things that are happening, and each of them are different. So it was the observation that there was no real solution as you went down the path that gave us this insight that, okay, so maybe we should build something for the A's. And once you did that thing for the A's, then the next question is like, how are you going to forecast based on this new information that you have, right? Because previously you forecast based on the opportunity object and a bunch of other stuff that is happening, right? But just like usually you did, like the forecast is mostly done by the first line manager understanding what's going on with their AEs and then passing something up. And that includes how much are you coaching, how much you believe this rep versus this other rep, how much, like, there's all these nuance into it that you don't take into account. So what we love about the space is that it's nothing but a big bag of human problems that were never solved the way that ERP was solved or the way that marketing automation was solved. And there's this gift that keeps on giving. So
I think that's a really good insight, because I think at the end of the day, the crux of where a lot of those, like, this big bag of problems comes from is that in order to do, like, sales necessarily has to be executed by people. And the reason why is because they're interacting with the counterparty, right? They're persuading them, they're helping to navigate the internal buying process or whatever. And so the problem is, unlike marketing automation, which is like very deterministic, right? Like, I can chart a path, et cetera, like there's not someone kind of like fighting back, if you will. Maybe it's the wrong
Yeah.
phrase, but like there's not like a counterparty who's like being squirrely. And so like that's why you need humans in order to like interface with that counterparty and like be persuasive and empathetic and so on and so forth. But the challenge, of course, is that like humans are messy.
Right.
And so providing them with like guardrails. And so, yeah, it's funny that, and I wonder if that's like what begets like the kind of the proliferation of like the sales stack, if you will, in order to kind of help what is essentially like, I don't want to say a necessary evil, but like a really important thing in sales is like the human component of it. But then you come a lot, like we're all people, I'm a person, and like we're all fallible, right? So like you get the upside of like high empathy, high persuasion, high communication, but then you have the downside of them being fallible. So you need a bunch of like tooling around that in order to kind of help facilitate that. And so I guess that's like kind of like what we're all doing is like, just going down the list of like figuring out like what the next critical path is, like what the next biggest constraint is with respect to SDRs or AEs. In our case, it's like helping sales managers be better, because again, they're just human. And what you're trying to do, like you can't have a robot manage them. Yeah, exactly. You can't have like a robot manage people because like good luck, right?
Right.
But so what we have to do is, yeah. So I think that like it's kind of fascinating. Like I wonder if that just means that like our category, or sorry, like our industry will always have like next things that it's kind of contending with, because there's like that human component in it, until like you don't need humans to sell, which I don't think is, it's gonna take a while there, I would imagine.
There's two important things that you said there. So unlike other parts of the organization where you're trying to remove human from the equation, in sales, you have to actually make the humans more productive, more, better at what they do. Because the fact that buyers are more informed before they come through the funnel makes the human actually more important than before. Because before you can get away with being instructive and being a good library of knowledge. Now you have to be really good at putting yourself in your buyer's mind and anticipate a bunch of need and like pattern match and like emotion match and do all these things that are part of the sales process. So that's one aspect that actually elevates the role of the human as opposed to diminishes. The other one is the fact that little changes, like little improvements throughout the funnel, have incredible amounts of impact in the bottom line. You can't say the same in ERP, right? Like a 10% improvement, whatever. A 10% improvement at the top of the funnel is massive, to the amount of close one. So there are so many angles in which you can come at it. And like for instance, you can find other points of leverage. Like a manager is a point of leverage, right? Because a manager had a 1 to 6, 1 to 10 ratio. You improve the manager, you improve 10 people. You improve 10 people on how they, discover, on how they qualify, or how they build champions. And you get this like multiplier effect of like, the little numbers turning into big numbers.
Yep. One thing I wanted to ask about is, I think because, you guys were definitely like out in front of the pack when it came to sales engagement. The accidental insight of the recruitment marketing automation applied to sales.
Hyper lucky.
Yeah. Well, sound like I'll take it all day long. But I think what a lot of people like very quickly recognize, they're like, oh wow, this is pretty rad. And it became a very competitive space in short order, right? There have been, only a handful of folks who have really gotten to scale, but it was a super competitive space. How did you guys kind of navigate that and contend with that, both at the beginning when there was like, a dozen, folks kind of like fighting it out, even to the last 12 to 24 months where there's, 2, 3, 4 kind of like big players that, that people kind of like, that are household names. How has it been in like executing in such a competitive environment?
It's been rewarding in that because we're so early into the market, any new competitor that comes into it helps you amplify the signal of like what engagement is.
Sure.
And so that means that for every dollar of marketing that I get $3 from other competitors and other people who want to get into it. Because even Salesforce wants to get into the market too. So they have an engagement product, et cetera, that they want to they're sort of like trying different ways of like, selling you an inferior thing, right? By bundling it, by giving it away for free, by doing this other thing, by giving it to you behind the back. Like there's all these dynamics that happen, but at the end of the day, the more the market talks about it, the more we all benefit. And as long as you are the leading product, you're going to be okay. I don't know that competitively, we have mastered this craft yet. Because at the same time that we were born, G2 Crowd was born, and that became its own dynamic of like, how do you win that? The Forrester and Gartners and whatever's of the world, are supposed to be this other arbiter of what's good and what's bad, but their relevance is sort of like in motion, right? And you're trying to figure out, how relevant that's going to be. And it turns out that just building the best product doesn't win either. So you also have to execute and tell the story. So frankly, the competitive dynamic has made us more alert in all the things that we need to worry about as we continue to grow. Because competitive, like let's all just get on the same page. All of us are in the kiddie pool,
right?
Wishing that we were in the adult part of the swimming, right? The kiddie pool eventually is gonna get old for all of us, right? Like a key pee, some kid pee on the corner, and it's a little warmer than it should be, and you just want to get out of the kiddie pool. And the only way to get out of the kiddie pool is to scale different functions, right? You scale sales, you scale compete, you scale success, you scale marketing, etc. And you have to do it at broad scale, international, in different languages. So, the competition at this scale has helped us sort of think through issues on how would they be when we are a lot bigger.
Yeah.
This is why like we are at the scale that we are, and we still behave like a startup, because that continuously knowing competitive pressure help us, figure out like the 3 vectors we're going to use to go and take care of this problem.
Yeah. How big are you guys now? How many employees do you have?
1,200.
Oh wow! Holy mackerel! Jeez Louise! We have 70, and it's like, whew.
I know.
Just like
I remember, I memorized names at 78. You know what I mean? Like I stopped memorizing at 200 because like my memory just gave up. But like I used to memorize all our customers, and now we have 6,000 of them. And like I used to memorize a lot of our users, and now we have 200,000. So like the scale and how do you stay personal and connected into the business as it grows is a real challenge, and I haven't figured it out, but I'm on it.
Yeah, for sure. That's we're literally at that point from a customer account standpoint where getting too many customers to like remember them all.
Right.
And then the other funny thing, this is this is a champagne problem, and I hope everybody has this problem in their sales experience. But you get to the point where you start having these customers that kind of like sound like each other, and their names are just like a little bit apart, and like you kind of like mix up.
That's amazing. That's
like
amazing.
Mix them up just like a little bit, like maybe like Asana is your customer, but then also like like Samsara is as well, and like and like you're like, oh wait, who was the RevOps person that I just had dinner with? Was it this one versus this one? And this is why CRM exists. May we all have way too many customers to be right.
We'll have that problem. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
may I feel that's like a Irish drink, like drinking blessing or something. Like may we all have this. May we all have this problem. And okay, so like you talked a little bit about earlier about like, hey, like do you go off and create a category, or do you try to like slot into something that already exists? What was like the hardest part of creating creating the sales engagement category over the last 8 years or so?
It was the initial part. The hardest part was always the initial part where you don't even know whether you're right or not. You don't even know whether the name is going to be that, whether people would actually gravitate towards it. Because remember, we came from a world in which InsideSales.com was evangelizing something, right? Sales acceleration was what they call it. And they had put in a lot of work with Gartner to actually get them to define sales acceleration as a category, create a quadrant, and blah, blah, blah. Right. And we were trying to like undo that and tell people that there's no such thing as acceleration, right? Like every segment has a velocity. Every buyer has a velocity. Every deal has a particular velocity, and you're trying to like engage, and then the velocity becomes rate limited by the deal, not by this platform, right? Like you can't call any harder into closing, right? Like that doesn't exist. So,
well, you can try, but it'll probably hurt your win rates as your customer is like, hey man, I'm used to like pushy salespeople, but like, whoa,
Right. Exactly. So like, so we were trying to undo a lot of that and get people to change their mindset into this thing. And I mean, we had a lot of self-doubt. Like, are we even right? Like, who are we to create a category? Like, a handful of kids in Seattle, and an immigrant, and they don't know what they're doing. Barely, he can barely speak English. Why would he be creating a category? So there's all these things that I'm trying to get over myself, and then our team, and then my team will be frustrated one night and be like, man, why are we doing this? Like, why couldn't you just call ourselves like a lighter CRM or something and be done with it? And so like the early conviction that you have to stick the landing on the category and like naming it and dropping in everything you do, and then getting aggressive and going to podcasts and talking to people and saying the word association was taxing, and it felt like you were crazy.
Totally.
So once you get past that,
feel crazy. I think that's a great description.
You're good. But it's that you're on the border of like, are you crazy? You sound crazy because nobody else is saying what you're saying, so you must be crazy. So that part was hard.
Yeah, so Nick Mehta was another. He's another fireside chat. So CEO of Gainsight for RevEx Fest here, and we were talking about category creation and how, especially like Gainsight was extremely early in customer success platforms, and we were kind of joking about how at least if you're running in a direction and there's like a handful of other people that are like running with you, well at least it looks like a race. Whereas if you're just like by yourself, just like running in one direction, there's no one with you, you look like a crazy person.
Right.
And so I think that you have to be like comfortable just repeating the thing that that you have conviction in to the right folks. The other thing that I think that that Nick touched on that was really really sharp is when you find the people who get it. All right, like the way I kind of describe this is like we all live in the future, right? Like the future that Atrium believes in is that it is table stakes, that managers use metrics to they manage by metric, right? They're data driven, right? It's like Moneyball, et cetera, right? And there's some people who live in the future. They're like most of the sales industry, like that's not well, that's not well understood, and then moreover, people don't do a good job of it. So you just have to. But when you find people who are in the future with you, and then moreover, like are kind of like on the cusp, you want to bear hug them as much as possible, and like keep track of them. So and maybe part of it is like so you don't feel as crazy, or like you find the other crazy people and you're like, all right, great, let's go like recruit other people into our crazy farm here, because like that's the only way we're gonna like drive enough of the market into this this new category. How did you guys like facilitate kind of community in as you were kind of finding like other crazy people who are at that bleeding edge with outreach?
So we have so few customers at the very beginning that it was easy to stick with.
You just knew them all.
You're
just like iMessage with them. Hey, what's up?
All the time, and like a lot of them are still here. And like it was interesting because some of those customers had better performance on outreach than we did. So I spent a lot of time kind of learning from them. I was like, wait, what are you doing? Like one of them was Jason Vargas. Like Jason Vargas had 50% connection rates on cold outbound sequences back when he was a data analyst. He was a savant on outreach, and if he would like, what I mean? Like, so we get to learn a lot from our customers. And the early adopters sort of really push your platform, sometimes healthily, sometimes unhealthily. So we built a lot of tech for this, like, I want the cars to fly and fly fast and fly hot, whereas I'm trying to sell to the people who are on horses. So that was a real struggle. It's like the category doesn't get anointed until you get at least the early adopters to follow you. But if you're living in innovator land all the time, like where they already went to the future, came back, and they want it now. Yeah, that was a lot of the struggle. And like you can't build a big tent if you don't bring anyone along.
Yeah, that is tough. That is like, that is like definitely a product management conundrum there. Where like you find those early believers, you bear hug them, you want to keep them stoked, you want to give them presents, but you have to also recognize the fact, like, you can only imagine, like, you guys do sentiment analysis and kind of responses and a bunch of other stuff right now. I can only imagine in like 2015, some of those like people were just like, hey, you know what you guys should do? You know what you guys should do? You should like grade what the response is. And then, like if you invest your engineering resources in that, then you don't get the like basic governance things, or like what things like, hey, sales ops is not going to buy this if like everybody can like just like swap
See
out the
each other's
custom
thing and copy it and whatever. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, or like swap out the custom fields, or like do something stupid or whatever. And like see if you just build the like very meat and potatoes stuff, even though you know that there's like these crazy pants features in the future. Yeah, that's a tough
But
problem
then
to
you don't want
solve.
to be like, you don't want to end up like Salesforce where you're nothing but meat and potatoes, and they're like, there's no spark, there's no like anything in it. Like, so the question is sort of like, this is where the art of entrepreneurship comes in. Right? Like you attune your ear on things that you know that you can build for the early adopters that will be truly recognized by the late adopters, right? So for instance,
Yeah.
I remember this early user, Scott Wong. He's now working with Ortega, I think, at Redis Labs, or maybe he's not. I forget where he went. But we hired him. But before we he can work for us, he was at a company that was really like pushing the envelope where which was going, and they were like, look, I need to automate a lot more of what we do so that I can get my SDRs more at bats. And for every person that we're trying to reach out to, we have disparate amounts of information. It's whatever we can find on them that is unique and important. And we have that algorithm sorted, but they need outreach to automatically do that. So that's why we created a programming language for email templates, so that you can use if-then statements and sort of like variables that will resolve real time to be able to use the most amount of knowledge that you had on anyone to be able to send the most comprehensively, crafted email that you could automatically, right? So if it wasn't for Scott, we wouldn't have built that. Yes, I mean, but now that we build it, that's like level 4 of anybody using, that kind of templating. And it's eventually we'll table stake, right? Oh, of course you can program like what the computer is going to say. And the same thing now with sentiment, right? Like we release sentiment for emails, and now people want sentiment for meetings. But what happens in a meeting is a meeting has a number of sentiments throughout. So there's no unique score for sentiment, but you have the opening sentiment, you have the pricing conversation sentiment, you have the closing sentiment, you have the next step sentiment. How did the rep do with each of those? So now you have to create this other, like you have to like take your vector and like make it into a matrix of sentiment and timings and outcomes and whatever. Like you say, do I build that for like the super advanced, flying cars people, or do I just like, make the button a little rounder, easier to click? I mean, like,
can I? What is it in Office Space? Can I get this button in cornflower blue?
Right.
Can I?
Right.
Can I?
Right, exactly.
I don't know. I don't know about if I'm. I don't know about this purple look and feel.
Like,
can I get a? Can I get,
are you gonna theme it for Halloween? What are we doing for Halloween?
Can I?
What I mean? Like,
can I get a? Well, but I think the other thing that you can do too is like when you get to a certain level of like engineering capacity and throughput, then like you can. You were kind of noting this with Andrew Kinzer earlier. Like you have your catalog of. You have your catalog of problems that you're going after, and like your catalog of ideas from customers and what have you. I mean, you guys are like now doing some pretty like whizzy stuff, right? Like, I mean, I think also the prevalence of and kind of the advancements in machine learning, AI, and what have you has really like made a lot of those things that would have otherwise been like very high level of effort and like speculative like potential upside, a lot lower level of effort and like less risky from an implementation standpoint. So I mean, maybe you can talk about how some of the stuff that you guys have been doing that, because I think it folds really well with how you guys are expanding out of sales engagement to like sales execution. Like obviously Kaya is a great example of this. I know you guys are doing some stuff in forecasting, which also has like ML baked into it as well. Like how is that like infusing Atrium's Outreach's platform?
Yeah, so one of the early sort of aha moments for us was that if you were to abstract sales is just a continuum set of conversations with people coming in and out, and with like the defined metrics for progress, right? Like, do you discover the problem? You discover, the people who care about that problem enough to pay for it. Did you turn that person into a champion, etc. So all these milestones are so like hard to get to unless you can guide a conversation towards it and then to a close. So what that insight gave us is that now we, that plus the advances on NLP and the fact that NLP got really, really good at being both real time and solving for the
accuracy.
Accuracy, but the dimensionality problem, the fact that you have like, so the problem in sales is that the words that don't happen all that often are the ones that matter the most.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
So right, so it's just like when that weird word shows up, like you gotta you really gotta catch it.
Right. So what our secret sauce is really how we train the machines. So once you have those insights, then we spend a lot of time. We have a big annotation team that all they do is making sure that we're training the machines right, so that we catch those things that are hard to catch, so that they can do it at scale later. And that has been really our aha moment. And it's funny, everything you do in a company happens because of a person, right? You started the company and you got an insight, and you hired the one guy that was obsessed about X, and then you hired the one guy that was obsessed about Y, etc. So we hired one guy who was obsessed about really getting to the bottom of like what is true for a machine to understand about sales, and then scaling it out. So he created our whole annotation pipeline program that then allows us to feed 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 machine learning programs at any point in time, comparing both, see which one leads to the major outcome, and then boom, that's our release. So we do that now with regularity. Like we don't even think about it. Like there's a team that is sort of like hypothesizing, there's a team that is building, there's a team that is shipping, and that's what really gives us a competitive advantage. But it wasn't, his name is Yife. It wouldn't be done if it wasn't for Yife. Yife sort of came out with like the grand idea to do it, and then now we have it, right? So there's always these leaps in like progress that you have because somebody made it so. You know what I mean? So this is why talent is so important, because without that, like for Kaya, literally Kaya was pitched to me by this guy Avi, who is now one of my VP engineers, who was like, I have this great idea. You have to come work for you to implement this great idea. Like the call lasted 30 minutes. I was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, I took him, presented to the board, and they said, we're gonna approve a bunch of money to like get Kaya going, because there's no world in which the rep is not real time enabled. You see what I mean? Like, but there's it's people that make things. In the meantime, you sort of like flounder and grow a little bit, and then you have the person who shows up and boom, you increase your rate by X%.
Yes, you need those special people with the bias to action and like the high levels of give a shit, who like really are obsessed with a specific thing. Just kind of in kind of like wrapping up here, obviously, we've been talking about outreach as an expansion from sales engagement to sales execution. A lot of kind of shifts going on in our industry right now. What do you kind of see playing out over the next like 12 to 24 months in our industry?
The secular win. So the things that you and I are looking at is our world is becoming dominated by this huge millennial sort of growth inside the organization. So millennials are 40% of the workforce right now. The oldest millennial is 42. They're sort of like digital natives or digital digital sort of like bridges, and that's just going to continue.
Right.
So there's this,
and then they're going to become managers and leaders and.
You already in that.
They already are. Yeah.
They're already leaders and managers. Like the majority are already, like, because if they don't get promoted within a year, they I'm just moving on to the next thing. So like but that's the new dynamic, right? So that we have to live with that. And they they care about promotion. They care about aligning values to are the values of your company align the values to I am. They're very diverse and they're very inclusive, so they want to see that in their lives. So they, whether they're buyer or seller, they want to see that in their environments. So there's this like seismic shift in the demographic for sales or demographic in general that is going to be reflected in the world of sales. So this is like, we are about to get a tsunami of change in terms of digital transformation. So like in the future, there will be no one that wouldn't want to manage their team without your application. They just won't.
Right.
And they won't accept it, right? Like they won't show up to a shop and be like, "What? You don't have that? I can't work here." So
right, it's kind of like how am I supposed to ride this bike without without any sort of like instrumentation on it? Like I'm used to a Peloton. Like this is crazy. Like
exactly. Like what do you mean I can't talk to my computer? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's an Alexa almost in every room in my house, and my kids are used to talking to walls. Just think about that. Walk into a room, Alexa, turn on the light, tell me a story. You see what I mean? And like that's already here. And like, you know, this generation is just gonna get more demanding and more exacting about what they expect from the technology, and we're gonna bear the brunt of it.
It's funny. It's kind of like the consumerization of IT, but it's not really the consumerization of IT. It's like the digital nativity of like B2B software, and like in this case with respect to sales. Wonderful. Well, Manny, this is super awesome. I appreciate the high octane conversation. I'm sure our audience is super has been super illuminated by by everything that we discussed. Really appreciate you taking the time, and looking forward to hanging out the next time I'm in Seattle. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you to the team at Atrium for making this happen. See you.
Cool. See ya.
See you, brother.
Hey, Pete and Manny, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for your time and for all your knowledge. I see here in the chat, the audience really liked this conversation. Thank you so much for sharing and for your time today. Audience, make sure to stick around for our events today and tomorrow and the day after. Next, we have this amazing panel, B2B Investing Now, SaaS Investing in Fundraising in 2023, with this panel filled with superstars. I'm pretty sure you're going to get a lot of knowledge from them today. So stick around. The panel is starting soon. And let me know if you have any questions in the chat. Thank you very much.